All right, welcome. Today, we're going to get into one of my favorite stories in all of tech. It's just wild. How did a company that got famous for selling books end up building the literal backbone of the modern internet? I mean, seriously, it's this incredible story of chaos, a massive internal crisis, and a solution that, well, it just bloomed into something nobody could have ever predicted.
Yeah, this is the big question, right? Because let's be real, when you think Amazon, you think about that 2-day shipping, maybe your Kindle, but what most people don't realize is that behind the scenes, Amazon Web Services, AWS, it powers a massive chunk of the internet. We're talking everything from tiny startups to absolute giants like Netflix. So how? How did we get here?
Okay, to really get this, we've got to go back, like way back, to the early 2000s. And you have to remember, Amazon back then was not the behemoth it is today. It was growing like crazy, sure, but internally, it was a total mess, super chaotic. And all that growth was creating some really, really big problems. So here's the core of the problem. Their process for building anything new was just insanely wasteful. Think about it. Every single time an engineering team wanted to launch a new feature, or even just a little internal tool, they had to start completely from scratch. I mean, they had to build out the servers, the storage, the networking, all of it, all over again, every single time. So just picture this. You've got dozens of really smart teams, all trying to solve the same basic infrastructure problems, but they're all doing it a little bit differently. So what you end up with is this huge, invisible mess of inefficiency. The crazy part is, no one person could see the whole picture. Nobody knew just how much time and money was going down the drain because every team was stuck in its own little bubble. It was like the company was fighting itself just to get anything done. So obviously, this couldn't go on forever. This internal chaos, it was actually becoming a serious threat to the whole business. And that's when everything changes. The turning point comes in the form of a now legendary memo, straight from the top. So around 2002, the story goes that Jeff Bezos sends out this incredibly blunt mandate. The big idea was pretty simple, but it was also totally radical for them. He basically said every single team has to expose its data and its functions through standardized APIs. You have to be able to talk to each other's systems. And the kicker? The memo made it crystal clear what would happen if you didn't. No wiggle room. This mandate basically forced Amazon's engineers to completely change how they thought about their work. It wasn't about just getting a project done anymore. No, to meet these new rules, they had to start building systems that were reliable, that were documented, that were consistent. In other words, they had to start treating their own internal infrastructure like it was an actual product.
Okay, and this right here, this is where the popular story about how AWS started usually goes off the rails. It wasn't some brilliant 4D chess move to conquer a new market. No way. The real story is actually so much cooler.
So the myth is that Amazon saw this future in cloud computing and said, hey, let's build a product to sell. But the reality? The reality is they built this incredibly powerful, scalable infrastructure just to save themselves. They did it to survive their own internal mess. The big aha moment wasn't deciding to build the cloud. It was looking at what they had already built out of pure necessity and realizing, wait a minute, every other company in the world needs this too. So, okay, now they've got this amazing, super robust internal product. The next question is kind of obvious, right? It's, hey, could we actually sell this to other people? And well, that single question led directly to the public launch of what we now call AWS. So in 2006, AWS officially goes live. And get this, they didn't launch with hundreds of services like they have today. Nope, it was just 3 core building blocks. First up was SQS, which is basically for messaging between different parts of an app. Then came S3, for storing pretty much anything you can think of. And then the real game changer, EC2. This was the one that let you rent virtual servers by the hour. You see, messaging, storage, and compute, those are the absolute fundamentals. They're what you need to build pretty much any piece of software.
And you have to understand, the business model here was just as groundbreaking as the tech itself. Before AWS, if you wanted to start an internet company, you had to go buy a bunch of expensive physical servers. You had to guess how much traffic you were going to get on your busiest day and then buy enough for that. Which, of course, meant most of that expensive hardware was just sitting there, doing nothing 99% of the time. The AWS model just completely flipped that on its head. You rent what you need, scale up or down whenever you want, and, this is the key, you only pay for what you actually use. It absolutely changed everything.
So why does this whole origin story matter so much today? Why should you care? Well, it all boils down to one huge concept: abstraction. The whole point of AWS, its ultimate goal, was to create a layer of abstraction. I mean, the product isn't really servers or storage. The real product is giving developers and entrepreneurs the freedom to just think about their app, to just focus on building cool stuff without ever having to worry about physical data centers or cooling or plugging in network cables. It basically freed an entire generation of builders from all that boring, heavy lifting of managing hardware.
And that really leaves us with one last big idea to chew on. Think about it. Amazon had this massive, painful internal problem. They built a solution just to survive, and then they realized that the solution itself was an incredibly valuable product. So the question I want to leave you with is this: what problems are you solving inside your own work, inside your own company, just to keep things running? Because the thing you built out of pure necessity, well, that might just be the very thing the rest of the world is waiting for. Thanks for listening.